people land in Belize, and like you said, they go, oh, beaches, islands, reef, and all of that. But that's not the lifestyle for everybody. In fact, people get island fever, and it's also more expensive. Everything on, the island has got to be barged in. So it could be twice the cost of houses in Cayo to build out in the Keys, or, down in Placencia along the beach.
All right there. Hello, I'm Kat Kalashian for Live and Invest Overseas. Today we're talking about Belize and a really interesting community in the mainland, which is not what most people think of when they think of Belize. They think of the beaches and the reef and the diving. Inland, it's a completely different world. And today I'm here with Phil Hahn, who I've known for quite some time now. And he has built something really unique and an impressive community for people looking for more independence, more space, and a little bit of a different way of living on mainland Belize. So, Phil, how would you describe this lifestyle generally in the Cayo District, which is where your project is located? How would you describe this kind of landscape and lifestyle to someone who's never seen it before?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this to you before, that it's kind of like if you were to take the Midwest, in the US, in Florida, and you kind of combine them, you're going to get this, rolling hills, farmland, tropical paradise kind of feel. And the vibe is a little bit different. Spanish Lookout's a Mennonite community. It's kind of the commercial engine of the country, very industrious and very organized. And then you get to San Ignacio, and I say Belize is where the Central America and the Caribbean meet. And you definitely kind of get that vibe in San Ignacio. It's got almost a kind of a bohemian sort of feel to it. It's a cool town, and the Carmelita Gardens vibe is very, peaceful, relaxed. We're amongst nature, but we're not that far from Spanish Lookout or San Ignacio. So, I like to say, hey, we want to get away. It's not too far away, and we're in that sweet spot.
Nice.
And so, yeah, people, their lifestyle, there's the river for floating and fishing, and there's the Maya ruins, there's the Maya mountains with the waterfalls and all of that. So those are all things that people do on a regular, not daily, but, daily they're going about their lives, gardening and growing fruit trees and playing games with their neighbors. So it's a very comfortable lifestyle.
And it sounds like it's a very outdoor oriented lifestyle. So definitely
Yes.
not the kind of lifestyle for the culture vulture looking for, a museum every week or
Right.
the opera. This is for hiking, horse riding, cave tubing, which if you've never heard of it, look it up. It's really interesting. I think it may
Yes.
only exist in Mexico and Belize, maybe Guatemala. It's a very rare little activity to do. And then you mentioned the Mayan ruins. I mean, this is definitely a very interesting landscape to explore. And I know you've mentioned in the past that it's also the breadbasket. So I guess that's where the idea of the Midwest comes in, where
Yeah.
it really is a place where things are growing all the time. And I guess your community is really putting that to the test. You can grow so much of your own food. You guys
Mm-hmm.
have community gardens, or is it just?
Yes. Yeah, we have community gardens, and people have their own, individual personal gardens. So yeah, it's a great. I mean, the alluvial soil in the Belize River Valley is great for farming and growing crops. And when I started Carmelita, it had been at least out to Mennonites for growing corn and beans. And I wasn't sure if they had used any kind of pesticides or anything like that. So we just let the land lay fallow. We brought in 80 head of cattle, and they grazed and fertilized and all of that. And so we've got great soil. In fact, I remember the first time that I was showing Carmelita, we just put in a road. We didn't have anything else there. And the young lady that was working for me, she was like, hanging on. What is he going to say when we drive in the first time? And so this is the first time I'd seen where they had put in the road. You could see the earth. I was like, wow, look at the dirt. And people were like, what? So fertile and rich. And so anyway, that's the why this is such a popular place. And Cayo is growing, it's the fastest growing area. I mean,
Yeah.
people are coming to Cayo. People land in Belize, and like you said, they go, oh, beaches, islands, reef, and all of that. But that's not the lifestyle for everybody. In fact, people get island fever, and it's also more expensive. Everything on, the island has got to be barged in. So it could be twice the cost of houses in Cayo to build out in the Keys, or, down in Placencia along the beach. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, Carmelita, when I came up with Carmelita, our motto is independent together. So, you can be as independent as you want, be together as you want. And, the idea is that you live in the heartland here. And if you want to go to the reef, go visit the reef. You don't have
Hmm.
to live on the reef. It's like every single day you're going to go scuba diving. No, you just go out there. It's an easy hop over there. And I just spent the weekend fishing down in Placencia, took some of the construction crew. And so Elise and I went, and we loaded up with fish, and everybody went home happy. And, it was just a little weekend outing, but, back home to peaceful Cayo area. And also the one thing that I noticed now is this whole sargassum weed thing
Yes.
is
Yeah.
really bad. And like, as soon as you turn down the Placencia Peninsula, it's like, ooh, it hits you.
Really?
And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And apparently it's not going to stop anytime soon. They're saying that the runoff from the agriculture in the Amazon has just created this bloom from Africa to the Caribbean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I've
uh,
seen that in other places as well. Even I mean,
have
in
you,
Europe, in the Mediterranean, it is definitely a global epidemic that's not
yeah,
going
yeah.
anywhere.
It is. And so, part of that, not to discourage people from wanting to be on the beach, but, consider that.
Right.
And I don't know what the stability of the real estate industry will be if this is a plague that is not going to
Right.
stop. People are
And,
saying,
and
okay,
another thing a lot of people talk about when they talk about the downsides of beach living is rising sea levels. These are places
mhm,
you're not exactly sure if that beach is going to be there in another 10, 20 years. So
right,
it's a
right.
bit of a risk.
Yes, that sandbar that you live on, maybe
Yeah.
isn't going to be
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
the good thing about property is that it's a physical asset that you can sit on. You can put up a tent and live on it, even in the worst of
Right.
circumstances. That's not really possible on the beach. You can't just put up a tent on the beach and who knows if it'll be there. The thing about owning real estate is that it's an asset that will be there. We call it a legacy
Hmm.
asset that you can give to your kids, and that's definitely what you guys are going for. And I want to repeat that saying that you said, the independent together, which is such a fascinating idea. Seems counterintuitive, but when you think about it, it describes perfectly what so many people, I think, want and are looking for, is to have privacy and independence, but not have to go it alone, not have to pave your
Hmm.
own road, put in your own electricity, put in your own, your own plumbing and drainage and everything else. You want somebody to lay a bit of a foundation. You want to know that you're not completely alone in all of this, and that you're with like-minded people out there. The people that are
Right.
thinking the same thing as you, that they want their own little garden. They want to
Hmm.
use solar power. They don't want to depend on the grid. But at the same time, you don't want to be a hermit living in
Right.
the jungle by themselves. You want
Hmm.
creature
Right.
comforts, a few amenities.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
So,
So,
that's it. And the independent together, applies to the people, but also, it is our house. We're completely off grid. So each house has its own solar, its own rainwater catchment, filtration, pressure system, eco-friendly septic tank. So we have these, independent,
right.
estates together in a community.
Right. You're not
And,
even dependent on the community's infrastructure. You have your own.
right.
So
Yep.
it's really something special. So I want to dig into this off-grid phrase a little bit because I feel like it might scare some people. You think of
Mhm.
off-grid and you think of like a porta potty with sawdust and
Right. Right.
a hammock between two trees and like I don't even know, slaughtering your own cattle. It doesn't have to
Uh-huh.
be quite so extreme. So what does off-grid actually mean here in your community?
Yeah, so we started with a wooden cottage, and solar powered, cistern built in. It was something that I integrated into the architecture right away. I didn't want a bunch of rotoplast tanks, around, and so the porches typically are the cisterns. And so we have that and the pressure system. So it started off small and then we grew. And I really kind of thought that we would have like maybe, a half a dozen small little 1-bedroom cottages. And then somebody would build a 2-bedroom on the river. And, that would kind of be the pattern. Well, we went from the little 1-bedroom cottage to a 2-bedroom house on the river to a luxury 3-bedroom swimming pool, gourmet kitchen, bar. It's the third house that we built and then put it on 2 lots. I was like, whoa, I definitely didn't see that coming. But it forced us right at the very beginning to, figure out this off-grid thing. How are we going to do, the pool pump to this or that, the 2 refrigerators, 2 dishwashers, the ice maker and the wine cooler. I mean, luxury living.
Right.
Off grid. And we did it. And since then, we've refined, and technology has moved forward. This is part of the gamble that, I took at the beginning is technology going to move forward, or are we going to have these backup generators everywhere and this cacophony of generators kicking on after a few cloudy days?
Mm-hmm.
That's long gone. We, years ago, we stopped having to include generators because this the battery technology, the storage, now it's not the old lead cell dumb batteries that, if it goes down too low, then it affects the lifespan and takes a long time to charge up. These lithium batteries and the inverters and charge controllers are just amazing. Panel technology is gone, and we started there were 250 watts. Now it's 750 watts. So it makes for us luxury off-grid living.
Yeah,
People
that's
want.
so impressive.
And we also have people that just want the simple life. They can still do that too. They just want a cottage, a little bungalow, something like that.
Yeah.
It's up to the individual. This is, driven by the owner. And we've got a great design team. Louise, the architect that has been working on this for us, I think it's like 5 years now. She's just fantastic. And she works with every, single homeowner and takes either a model home or ideas that they have and then helps to modify them to be appropriate for the climate, for off-grid living, for their lifestyle, for their budget. And so, yeah, we didn't ever really do the cookie cutter. We had some little cottage neighborhood, but even the cottages were customized. So we always, it's people's, dream home. They, for some into Belize or to Carmelita might be like plan B, but for other people, it's plan A. It's like, hey, I'm going to leave the Midwest. Instead of settling in Florida, I'm going to settle in Belize. Once you're on the plane, it's not that much farther.
Yeah, exactly. So is there anything that you hear from people that come to visit on tours or people that have just moved in that is surprising that, is there a big shock, anything that you hear from a lot of people about what surprises them when they arrive?
Yeah, I guess it's the pace. That things are slower and that's hard to adjust to sometimes. The rural aspect, when we first started Carmelita, we were very remote. So the roads, that lack of decent infrastructure. You think about Belize in that context. So it took me a little while when I first came to Belize, which was like 22 years ago. And I started, driving around the country and saying, it's like, wow, what a lack of infrastructure. When you start to think about this small country with 400,000 people that are spread out. So you've got a village of, 1,000 people over here. There's one, 500. And so if you think about the cost per capita to put a road 30 miles into the bush to service a village of 500 people. I mean, it's really, if everybody was together in one city, we have beautiful infrastructure, but so Belize is the way that it is for certain reasons. And there's a certain charm to it, but it is sometimes a little disconcerting for people. Like, when am I ever going to get there down this dirt road?
So it's a good advertisement for making sure that you go and visit the places before you make any big commitments.
Yep.
So people in your community, what would a typical day look like for somebody living where you're living in your residential community?
So we have a lot of retirees. So we do have people that still work. We've got a nurse practitioner. She does, online medicine, and we got people that do day trading and everything. So there's still people that work day to day, and then on the weekends they'll go off on excursions and they'll go fishing or go out to the Keys or go scuba diving or go to the mountains, to the waterfalls, things like that. And then we have other people that are really involved with local programs, volunteering, helping out in the primary school, teaching music lessons, teaching sewing. One of our owners, she's actually was a missionary in Africa. And so this is like her life passion. So she's also a published author and all of that. But now what she does is all of these different things and volunteering. And she posted a whole like elder care workshop one time in the village, and had other volunteers in the community came out, and they're doing everything from, helping people with hair and eyeglasses and their feet massage and everything. It's just like a wonderful outreach, and just something that she just does,
Yeah.
And now we have on site an archaeological site. We have these Maya mounds. And when I designed Carmelita, I made a park out of it and worked with the director of archaeology at the time. Well, now he's at the University of Northern Arizona, and he comes down with students every year. And this past year we met, and there's a new site that they're going to start to excavate in Santa Familia Village, right? Like a mile from our place. And they're also going to put a unit on our mounds and start to excavate. And so one of our owners, Matt Rossano, he's a retired professor with a real passion for archaeology. So he's kind of spearheading this whole thing, working with the
That's amazing.
the archaeologists. And so people will be able to get it. This will be a community archaeology. So
Very
people
cool.
can go in and dig and, get the shakers out there and try to find relics and stuff. So, and that just, walk from your house with your cup of coffee and, go do a little, archaeological exploration.
Very cool. So to go back to the homes, because you mentioned a little bit about how customized they are and they're really tailored to each person, but I know there is a certain foundation that you've put in. And so what systems are in place in general in the community? Like what is the level of infrastructure or amenity that somebody could expect when they're coming in and thinking about building their own home there?
Yeah. So, of course, we have all of the roads in, we have a green space. So one of the things that I did was understanding that we wanted to be self-sufficient, be able to be food secure and all that. The Land Utilization Authority in Belize is the kind of physical planning unit where you apply for subdivision, and they require 10% green space. I laid it out to have 20% green space. So all of the properties, back up to green space, or they're on the river, or they're just larger properties. And so the amenity of all that green space is nice for the gardens, for the orchards, for walks. There's the meadow with the beautiful fireflies and all of that at night. And then we have a pickleball court. Of course, you can't, anywhere in the world now, you got to have a pickleball court.
Pickleball.
Right. So we have that. I actually built like a sport court, basketball and soccer goals and all of that, but nobody used that. And one of our residents finally, said, "Hey, can we just paint a pickleball court on it?" And so we actually have 2 pickleball courts now. And I'm excited to announce that what's coming is the pool and clubhouse. So
Nice.
we're going to have this community center. Right now, I have a facility that we're using as the gathering spot. That's the community center called the Garden Club. And so that's where we have our potlucks. We have our town hall meetings. We have Matt, the professor I was telling you, he likes to every once in a while do a lecture. I guess he just gets that itch that he's got to scratch. And he says, okay, I want it. So he's done fun ones about, pirates, about flat earth society, about Maya culture and things. And so we all get together, and that's where we have like today is muffin day. Thursday will be pancakes. Tomorrow is Super Wednesday, and so we have soup, and so that's our gathering place. We've got bingo and also whatever different things there. And
so very
Deborah,
vibrant, a very active community.
very active. Yeah, there's always things going on. Yeah.
So we've been talking about how the cost can really be affected when you go inland versus being on the coast. What kind of budget are we talking about to build a home here in this inland part of the country?
Yeah. So again, depending on the home, and it's like a bag of groceries. It's like, how much does a bag of groceries cost? Well, it depends on what you put in it. So in our case, we have cottage models, bungalow models, villas, and what we call manor homes, which would be more large custom villas. And our cottages are around the $150,000 to $180,000 range. The bungalows are 250 range, and then the villas would be 300 plus, depending on what they do. So recently we built a house for a gentleman that has 3 bedrooms, has a fitness room, has a sauna, has, all of it.
Wow,
And again, all off grid.
that's incredible.
Um, yeah, yeah. And so that house today would probably cost a little under 500,000 to build. But then, like I said, we have the other ones and also introducing what we call hamlet homes. So these are attached residences.
Okay.
And so Luis has come up with a great plan. From the outside, it looks like a villa, right?
Mhm.
But it actually has a 2 bedroom, 2 bath unit, and then 1 bedroom, 1 bath units under the same building. And so there we're going for that, $150,000 starting point for the 1 bedrooms, and then around like 230, 240 for the 2 bedroom.
Okay.
And we'll be introducing that actually for the first time at the conference coming
Oh,
up next week.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
So I know that the community is pretty built up at this point. Is there a number of how many lots or how many homes are still available in the community right now?
Yeah. So the total lots, which would include the town square commercial lots, is 245. And so there are about 212 residential lots. And we have sold about 160 of them. So there's still plenty left, but
Mhm.
the inventory is dwindling,
Right.
and we're not remote out in the boonies anymore. Carmelita Gardens is well known within Belize. Even the government uses as an example of alternative
Oh,
energies
very
and,
cool.
and how to develop sustainably. So when the bridge is completed from Santa Elena and the paved road from Spanish Lookout to San Ignacio, it's going to boom. We are going to boom. So if you want
Now's the
to
time.
get ahead of it, this is like
Yeah.
the last chance. This is
Yeah.
like I said, I hear the pile drivers in the bridge, boom, boom, boom. It's coming.
Progress is coming. Yeah. All right. Well, that's so great. And thank you so much for taking the time. If anybody is curious about this lifestyle, what's the next step? I guess the good thing would be to take a trip down to Belize.
Yes, yes, we do virtual tours, so that's a good start to just kind of get a visual. And we drive around the community, and we look at some of the houses. So that's a good first step, and we do a Q&A after that, detailed and specific. And then from there, schedule a trip, come down, and we've got places on site to stay, and you just get to know the neighbors and get to know the lay of the land and the villages and the towns nearby. We do have a tour after the Live and Invest in Belize conference next week. And that basically we do that. We do a tour. We go through Spanish Lookout, stop for ice cream, and get that kind of lay of the land there. Do Carmelita, and then we go through San Ignacio on the way back to the conference hotel.
Excellent. Well, I hope that everybody watching this has signed up for our Belize conference and will be on your tour. If not, make sure to get in touch with Phil and take part in a virtual tour. And in the meantime, I thank you for your time, Phil, and thank everyone for watching.